Welcome to Equipped for Impact, the podcast designed to assist Christian parents, leaders, and educators to raise up the next generation to stand firm in their faith and influence their world for Christ. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm not here with Lewis today. I'm sorry, people. You're going to miss out on him, but it's all right. I am not running solo. I've got a special guest with me here today. I'm here with Jamal. Jamal, hey, how you doing?
I'm great.
Great.
Thanks for being part of it.
Yeah, glad to have you with us. So Jamal is the lead pastor of Abide Bible Church. He's been married to his wife for 10 years, and they have 7 children, 3 here with us on earth and 4 in heaven. He's currently pursuing his doctorate at Dallas Theological Seminary, so we have to stop here for a second. A fellow Dallas friend here. He and I are taking classes at the same seminary, but most importantly, he loves Jesus and is passionate about helping people abide in him. So, Jamal, great to have you with us.
Yes.
It's great. I always love when you're around here at the school with us and speaking in chapel and all of that. So I'm glad we're able to get you here on the podcast.
Yes, Nate. It has just been exciting to even think about the possibility of being a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So we've got to start off with probably the most important question, and people who are here listening, longtime listeners know this is a very important topic on our podcast, and that is, what is your opinion on breakfast for dinner? All right, so breakfast after 10:30, is that okay or not?
I think it's okay.
It's okay.
We do
All
it
right.
often, quite often.
So Lewis is not here with us, and he cannot defend himself in this situation. So we're going to take that for the team. That's a win for us.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
All right, so now we got the nonsense out of the way, talking about breakfast for dinner and all of that. One of the things I had heard about that you do specifically, so our podcast is all for parents, and
Yes,
and you've got a lot of passion and experience, I guess, kind of working with young men especially. Yeah. And so a lot of our listeners, they've got young men in their household, boys that they're raising to become young men. So I just wanted to dive in and kind of talk about this, like when you think about parents and as they're raising boys, or let's start here before I get too far into it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your ministry with young men in the community. Like, what does that kind of look like there? And then we'll kind of get into the specifics of it.
Yeah. So for me, I was really intrigued by a guy named Rusty McKee, who has just been a great friend of mine.
Okay.
And he started a ministry called Man School. And so this summer, I just had an opportunity to learn about it and just hear his heart for it.
Okay.
And it's always been a passion of mine, one, because just knowing my background, I didn't grow up with my father in my life. And so seeing other young men not have a father figure for them just kind of tugged at my heart. And so the ministry really starts on, how do you help a man or a young boy become a man? What are those stages or those marks that they need to help them to grow into manhood?
Okay.
And so he really laid it out very well. And once I seen that, I was like, man, this is what I was been looking for.
Okay.
To help myself with my son, but also to help other young men who haven't, or their father figure wasn't there, or their father figure is there and they just don't know how to walk with their sons. And
Gotcha.
so that became just a heart and passion for me.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so this is it like a program, like you call it man school? So it's a program you bring these boys through to kind of get them there?
Yeah. So the way that Rusty sets it up is a 5-year program.
Okay.
Because his heart is to catch them at the age of 13 and get them to 18.
Okay.
And so you walk with them every year, focusing on one particular area. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it just helps them to grow in that one area, that one year, and then they can focus on the next year on another area.
Gotcha.
And so it's a healthy program, but I call it discipleship. I think it's everything that you need. He just gives you the resources to be able to do it effectively.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So each year has a focus
Mm-hmm.
and you're just really being intentional about that. I love the intentionality there.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
I mean, you mentioned it, so let's just go there. So what are kind of the 5 focus areas that you dig in with these boys?
Yeah. So first year is a warrior.
Okay.
Second year is a lover.
Okay.
Third year is a worker. And then the fourth year is a monk and then a sage. And so that first year, what you're really focusing in is teaching them how to bless instead of curse. How do you fight for blessing others and not cursing them? And then that second year is how do you partner that fight with loving?
Okay.
Like how do you look at the world and see like the trees are beautiful, you know, the ocean is peaceful, and how do you have emotions with that and not using it in a sexual way that is explicit, but learning how to use love in a healthy way. And then that worker, how do you work? How do you give what God is giving you? Like we see in the garden, he allowed Adam to work. So how you have the responsibility of working.
Gotcha.
And then that monk stage is how do you isolate to be able to really grow and really be with God? Not isolating away from people, but going into that sacred place for you to study, grow, and dive deeper in your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And then that final stage is how do you disciple others?
Okay.
How do you help them to grow while you're growing at the same time?
Gotcha.
So those are the stages that Rusty used, and I think are very helpful.
Okay. I think that's interesting that like when you were listing the stages, my mind immediately went to like warrior, like, okay, think strong macho man, I'm going to go out and be a protector,
Right.
But that's not really the way it takes it. So, and even the love, right? Being a lover, it's not, like you said, a sexual explicit thing,
Right,
but
right.
it's a biblical, holistic idea of that.
Yeah.
So how have you seen maybe some of the misconceptions, especially with those stages? How have you seen that play out in some boys that you've walked through this program?
I think like when you go through the questions, because the way he has it set up, there's a Bible verse that you start with, and then there are questions that you dive in. It'll be about 3 or 4 questions that you answered together, and just to see how they navigate through. So one of the stories we talk about is Samson. And so we talk about how Samson as a warrior, what kept him from being able to safeguard, protect, to be able to just not fall into lustly desires so that he could be able to fight correctly.
Gotcha.
And so I asked the young men, like, what are some things around you or in your life that's keeping you from desiring something that God doesn't want you to desire? And so teaching them how to cultivate instead of consume all the time. Teaching them the responsibility of being a man. I think our culture does a good job of saying, hey, you got to provide as a man. But when you look in the Bible, what we see is when Jesus came, and God's whole story is he's trying to redeem things. And as he's redeeming it, it provides a safe place for others to be able to provide space and things like that for us to grow and for others to grow. And so it's a upside down philosophy of the culture, which I really, really love, because it's going back to the biblical foundation of what was God's good design from the beginning, and how should we look at that and be men in that way.
Gotcha.
And so that has been like really helpful for me as we talk about young men going from boyhood to manhood, because the reality is most young men don't have a male figure in their lives to give them a rite of passage to move to a next stage of life. And so when you look at like God does with Jesus from the beginning, he blesses him in 4 different ways. He says, hey, this is my son. So he takes ownership of my son, and I'm blessing him. Then he says, I love him. This is my beloved son whom I love. And so he shows like, I love him as well. And then he shows him another as like, I'm pleased with him before he even did anything. And then he gives them opportunity to lead. He says, hey, you guys listen to him. And so what God does is what every man needs as they're growing from boyhood to manhood. They need to be blessed by another man to say, I'm pleased with him, I love him, and I want to encourage him to grow in his leadership. And I think that rite of passage that most young men and me myself didn't get, it really hinders us from growing from manhood to boy, from boyhood to manhood.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's interesting. So I'd never seen that until you brought it out. The fact that there's all the different times that God speaks from heaven, right? In the scriptures. That's really interesting. So you talked about these rites of passage. So what does that look like for boys today? Of course, most of our listeners are in America. So in American context, what does that look like? Those rites of passage where a parent can make those affirmations to their children.
Yeah. So what we see, we'll talk about the cultural way of rite of passage, and let's talk about a biblical way.
Okay.
Because reality is, we in America are probably the only culture that doesn't do a rite of passage for a young man in their growing up. But what we do see in a cultural way, the rite of passage is why young men get into gangs and why they get into fraternities and all those things, because they have a peer on peer calling them to a higher thing and saying, hey, we can do this together. Well, in a biblical way, or what we see in the Christian culture, as a parent, what we should see is the father figure saying to the son, hey, I'm pleased with you and I'm excited for where you're growing. And so what we did with our young men is we had the mothers to write a letter to their sons, and we had the fathers to go out on dinner. And so we went to Outback one night, and I shared with the young men, hey, this is my heart for you, and I'm excited for you wanting to be on this journey. And so we just had a meal together, and we were able to just encourage each other in that moment. And that was just a rite of passage for these young men to say, man, other men care about me and they want to pour into my life. So I think it's moments like that.
Give some belonging, right? It almost is like, I fit here. Would you bring up the, gangs or fraternities, right? Those are more about belonging than anything else. Wow, that's awesome.
So that's what the rite of passage is really doing, helping them to feel like they belong and that others encourage and want them to grow into manhood. And so I think that's what it is.
Gotcha. Okay. So would you encourage parents to, set up certain intentional rites of passage as they map out, their kids' next couple of years?
Yeah. One of my friends in West Virginia, he took his son on a trail, and they walked the trail together, and he just called out to manhood. He wrote a letter to him in the midst of it. They did a fire that night after they did the rite of passage. It's just that moment where the kid will remember, oh, my dad intentionally did this. And it doesn't have to be anything outrageous. It can be a walk together. It can be a dinner together. It can be you buying them something and writing them a letter. Those moments a kid would never forget, because you took the intentionality to be present with them in a very special moment.
That's awesome. That's really good. So when we think about this, you've got this plan, you've 5 years, and obviously we understand, of course, I'm an educator, so I've got curriculum and plans and maps and all that stuff. But I think you and I both know, discipleship is not a linear process, right?
Absolutely.
So there's those times where there might be a setback or circumstances. Maybe you've gone through one of those rites of passage, and then, the man falls. How do you use those opportunities to point them back to the gospel and help kind of kickstart or restart that spiritual journey?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think what you think about is when you see the gospel, we know that it's needed not just at the point of salvation, it's needed all of your life. You can never graduate from the gospel. And so you use every single moment as an opportunity to point people back to Jesus. And so it shows for us that God's great design was for everything to be perfect. However, we know the initial conflict is their sin. And then what we do is realize, hey, there is something broken, and who's the only one that can solve it? Jesus. And so in the midst of that, you have a response to choose. Either I'm going to follow Jesus or I'm not. And so I have a young man that we're walking through, and I gave him a task. I said, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write down all your assignments when they're due and check them off when you do it. And so later he came back and he had a moment where he actually couldn't play in a basketball game because his grades were down.
Oh, man.
And so I checked back with him. I said, hey, did you create that list and did you check it off? And he was like, man, I forgot to do that. And I was just like, man, one simple thing of that checklist. And why do we want to do that? Because we want to be held to an account. This is what I need to do. And but at the same time, I never shamed him for not doing it. And then at the same time, he was able to redeem that and be able to play again. And so that's a gospel presentation of, oh, I made a mistake. But God doesn't look at us and say, oh, now I'm writing you off. I never want to deal with you again. No, God says, I'm going to give you grace. And also, you may have consequences, but at the same time, you can be redeemed in this.
Gotcha.
And that's the beauty of the gospel, where we can take these moments to help these young men and others feel that they can be redeemed even in the midst of failing.
That's great. We talk a lot about those little moments like that and how our reaction as parents can, kind of detour one way or the other, right? And shut down those conversations. So, I mean, I know in my own life, either as a parent or in my role at the school, it's really easy to react in a situation like that. And it's like, I told you to make this list and you didn't do it. And then that just shuts down the conversation. Like, how do you keep from, in those moments, in the heat of the moment, like not responding negatively, but being able to gently redirect when you see a mistake that's sometimes even just a really careless mistake like that?
First, I would say I'm imperfect, so I don't do it well. And so I can think about, even in our own family, I think about moments where I don't always respond immediately like I should. However, what I've learned and what I'm seeing through scripture is be willing to take ownership of your mistakes and admit that. However, at the same time, be always proactive, allowing the Spirit to lead you in every situation, every conversation, and everything you do. And when the Spirit is leading, that's when those opportunities can happen. And I think an encouragement for parents is to realize that you're going to make a mistake and you're going to fail. At the same time, your kid wants to know that you will be willing to ask for forgiveness even when you do, and then start back where you failed and restore what you missed. And I think, once a kid realizes that, hey, my parents can admit they're wrong, they can take ownership of when they sin, then those opportunities, those grace moments even come from the kid, because the kid is like, oh, I know you didn't mean that. Right. And so I think it works both ways. You make sure that you're proactive, being led by the Spirit, while at the same time being willing to ask for forgiveness. And I think it builds grace in the kid to give you grace when you need it.
Gotcha.
So I think it just goes all around us realizing that we need the gospel. We're imperfect and we're going to make a mistake, and God can redeem that. While at the same time, it does build grace in our kids to give us grace when we need it.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So as you've worked with young men, I've heard you reference certain sections of scripture, but like what are the passages that you find yourself going back to over and over again with young men? Like on this podcast, we constantly go back to Deuteronomy 6, for parents, passing on to their children and while they walk by the way, like all of that in Deuteronomy 6. Like, what are some passages you find yourself going back to time and again?
I think about Ephesians 6, don't provoke your children to anger. I think that one in this season has been very impactful for me because I just love the fact that God is encouraging the parents to not provoke their kids. Another one that comes to mind is, you think about Proverbs, train up a child. And what's unique about that scripture is training up a child in the way that they're gifted so that God can use them. So you're training them in the way that they're wired. And what does that look like for them? So that's a passage that I go to. Deuteronomy 6 is another passage. We think about Psalm. I think it's Psalm, is it 127? Like arrows. You think about that. I also think about the psalmist when he's talking about the wife and the children are like shoots at your tables, and those are like are verses that come to mind when you're thinking about raising kids or even having a home setting that is just open for the gospel and open for Jesus to be glorified in the midst. And so it's verses like that come to mind when I think about it in that sense.
Gotcha. And what about for like the boys you're working with, where you're trying to really instill biblical manhood in them? Like, what are some passages for them?
I think about like the story of David. When you look at that story, I think about how his courage and how he wanted to be a man after God's own heart. And I think those type of passages really help me to encourage young men to find the way that God's wired them and to find how God is using them in their unique way. And so that becomes an encouragement to me to help young men. But I think about stories like Samson. Those are great stories to encourage the kids on the importance of understanding who you are, understanding your desires. And I think it's stories like that really just help me walk with the young men. And I think those are just sweet stories for me.
That's good. Yeah. We can learn so much from those. And both the successes and the failures, right? You mentioned David and Samson, and I mean, their stories are stories of failure as much as they are of success. How do you help a boy, where you're putting a role model in front of them, and you already mentioned, your own failures and, cultivating that grace in either your children or the boys you're mentoring. But here we've got even biblical role models, and then they fail. How do you help them navigate, seeing their heroes fall or stumble, whatever it is?
Ultimately helping them realize that Jesus is the ultimate man of all. And so when we help the young men realize that none of us are Jesus, and that outside of Jesus, everyone else is going to sin and fall short, and helping them realize that grace is always available. And it helps us see the importance of the gospel and what Jesus did and why he came. And so help them realize that on this side of glory, God is not expecting perfection. He's expecting us to continuously grow so that we realize that our holiness and set apartness is helping us to show the world more of Christ. And then in the midst of that, helping them realize that's why Jesus returning, Jesus coming back is so, so important, because we're going to always fall short of the glory of God. But our aim and desire should be that we be repentive and we look forward to when Jesus returns. And so helping them have a gospel understanding in every season, every form of life actually helps them understand that, hey, I'm going to be an imperfect man and I'm going to raise imperfect kids, but I can be gracious to them in the midst of that because Jesus is the only perfect man. Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, we talk a lot about, the creation, fall, redemption, restoration, right? And everything is pushing us towards that longing for the restoration one day. And even in moments like that, right? I fail. Here's your hero that you looked up to, and he fell. But that's because we're looking forward to the better Adam, the better David. That's going to come back. So that's encouraging there. When you think about, we already talked about the rites of passage, but what is one kind of specific, kind of practical takeaway you wish every father or mother did consistently to disciple their boys, especially to maturity? The biggest thing I've been learning over the past probably year has been being emotionally available for kids. When One thing there's a book by Chip Dodd called Parenting with Heart.
Okay.
And what he talks about in there, he doesn't talk about like tips for parenting. He talks about tips for the parent to be the best parent that they can be. Mm-hmm. And what he says in the book and what he says overall is we can help our kids grow when we're emotionally healthy and stable. And so I believe like what is really key and what I've learned over the years is the importance of being present with our kids emotionally. Mm-hmm. So when I think about one of our kids, when they're emotionally just longing to be with us, sometimes we go and we'll just lay in the bed with them and just give them the presence of being near and close and relationally available for them. Mm-hmm. And I believe, I asked our church the question a couple weeks ago, like, what does every child want from a parent? And I believe the answer ultimately boils down to the reality is every child wants their parent to be relationally active in their lives. And what does that look like for that particular child? And it's different than your other child. And
that's
so
exactly right.
I believe the biggest thing that every child wants from a parent is to be relationally active in the way that they need. And so that's being near, that's being close, that's being present, that's listening to them, helping them grow emotionally with sadness and fear and anger and shame and guilt and hurt. And if we can walk with our kids through those emotions, we will create healthy kids who can grow from whatever season of life they're in to the adult maturity season that we all want for them. And so I believe that's the biggest thing that I would want and I would encourage parents to do is be relationally active with your kid, especially the way that they need specifically.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how do you balance that with, helping them, you said helping them navigate those emotions, the sadness, the fear, whatever, anger, even. So how do you balance between this is a legitimate emotion, right? Yeah. And affirming that so that they don't just shut down, but then also not going to the other side and like feeding it of, something happened at school, they're sad because a friend was mean to them. Or especially when they get to older ages, it's a text thread or drama or whatever's happening, and you don't want them to just shut out,
right? But
you also don't want to feed it and just them give in to their emotions. So how do you balance that as you're working through that with your kids?
Right. So I think the biggest thing is helping them figure out what is the emotion that you're feeling and why are you feeling it, and then how does that interfere or how does that impact your identity in Christ? Now, am I trying to, so you take a kid who is just feeling sad in the moment. Yeah. Like, is this sadness because you lost something or there is something that you value, or you just want pity and you want me to sympathize with you, So navigating with it as your kid, I think is a healthy place. But also just talking with them. Like, why are you sad? What's going on? And now let's figure out what's really happening in the midst of this sadness. I think the conversations is actually what helps you be able to navigate that as a parent. But at the same time, it's trusting the Holy Spirit in the midst of it. Because you could want to be a parent of, I just don't want to feed in this right now. Yeah. I don't want to hear it. You're just complaining.
That's typically my reaction. It's just look, stop it. You get over it in about 5 minutes and let's move on. Which is not always the best reaction.
I think about one moment we had, and so we were at a football game feeding for a team, and our kid was hit in the face with the ball, and our kid ran to us, and I just knew in the moment I wanted to say, "No, get over it. You'll be okay." But what?
Rub some dirt in it. Shake it off.
But what my kid really wanted was he felt embarrassed because in front of a group of older high school kids, he get hit in the face with a ball. He just really wanted a moment to cry and be okay, and he'd get over it.
Yep.
And so I just held him, and he cried in my arms, and 5 seconds later, he was just okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's those moments where our kids want to say, I want a safe and secure place to be able to express what I'm going through. And I know that you or the Holy Spirit will lead me to know what I need to do next. And I think those are what kids want more than anything, of a safe place to be able to share each emotion. And I believe that your calmness and the Holy Spirit helps them regulate to where they need to be.
Gotcha.
So I think it's moments like that are sweet.
Yeah. And having that, it's almost like home base. Right?
Yeah.
So they know they've got home base, and that actually gives them the courage to go out and do other things, because they know they can come back. And find that safety if they need it, when they need it. So that's a great example and illustration for all of us. So kind of as we're winding down here at the end, I've asked a lot of different questions, but when it comes to parenting, especially discipling young men, what is a question you wish more parents were asking that would help them better disciple their kids?
I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me?
Okay, good.
I think a lot of parents feel like if they can't figure it out, then they fail. Instead of asking for help to navigate through. See, a parent won't be replaced, but they need resources to help them be present. And so a kid is not looking for another parent. They're looking for their parents to be present. But what often happens is we don't know what we're doing. We don't know the resources. And so we don't ask for help from others to help us. And that's what I love about like Man School Resource. It's not that Rusty is trying to replace parents. He's trying to give parents tools to be able to do what God has already called them to do. And so if more parents would show their need for help, I think it would be a lot more just resources and opportunities for others to step in and help or give resources so that they can flourish as parents. And I love, like, here at the school, you want to come alongside schools and parents to fulfill what they're already doing. So you're another resource to help parents to be able to fulfill the calling that God has given them. And if parents would ask for help, it could help the community around them actually grow holistic kids who can flourish, because we don't know everything. No, we don't. And we don't have all the resources, and we're not gifted in every single way. And that's why the body is very important. You think about 1 Corinthians, it says, hey, the eye is important just as the big toe. Why? Because they need each other. And that's what it is. Like, each parent need each other in different seasons of life to help each other grow.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, and that's why we have this podcast, right? So listener, you're at the right place. Make sure you subscribe. There we go. I got my plug in early. No, but that's good. So you mentioned resources. So Man School, obviously, for young men, raising them, to be godly young men. Is there an equivalent, like women's school?
Man, I wish. We've asked Rusty several times, like, is there a women's school? And we're like, he's like, I can point you to some good directions, but it's not any like resources that I know of currently. There are some good books that you can read that focuses on kids in general, which I think are helpful. But I don't think I've seen any program that kind of does that for women.
And I think, of course, you mentioned from your own story, not having that father figure. I think that it's an epidemic in America. So we see that need when the male figure is not in the child's life, boy or girl. You see those ramifications, which I think that's a whole nother episode. Maybe we'll get you back on for that one. So, well, as we wrap this up, is there anything else you wish I had asked you, for you to share with our listeners on this podcast?
No, I think it was great questions, great conversation. I just pray that, parents, young men, and I would say young women as well, would just, be able to find that opportunity where others pour into them. And so that's my encouragement and my hope. I believe that, God has called us here in this community to do that. And so I'm excited about what God is doing through us.
That's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So if somebody wants to get a hold of that Man School curriculum or different resources, where can they find that stuff?
So manschool.co.
Manschool.co. Okay, we'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, you can go
so that
right
you
there.
can just get that there. Well, thank you so much, Jamal, for joining us. This is great, and I mean, it sounds like we've got a couple other episodes that we need to record here sometime soon. And thank you all for listening to Equipped for Impact. If this episode encouraged you, please share it with another parent, especially a boy parent who could use this resource, and be sure to subscribe so you can get more of these types of resources we're putting out here on the podcast, and so that you don't miss our next episode, where hopefully Lewis will be back with us and he can defend himself when it comes to breakfast for dinner. Until then, keep leading the next generation to stand firm in their faith and influence the world for Christ.